It all started with a very simple idea. Tell the stories of how successful middle market CEOs made it to the corner office. I'm Brand Handley, founder and managing director of Resource Options International, or ROI. We're the USA's premier executive search firm focused exclusively on empowering middle market companies to attract, hire, and retain A players while transforming top executives' careers and lives. ROI's Into the Corner office is dedicated to discovering how middle market CEOs advance their career, and we're making these remarkable and sometimes quite unbelievable stories available to you for the very first time. Listen and learn about the challenges they've overcome, the interesting people they've met along the way, and the lessons learned that steered these executives' unique journey into a middle market corner office of their own. I know you enjoy these CEO stories as much as I've enjoyed recording them. So thank you for listening today. And if you like what you've heard, rate us on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. I'm looking forward to you joining me on the next great middle market CEO adventure into the corner office. Today, my guest is Michael Castagna, CEO of MannKind Corporation. Mike has over 20 years of experience in healthcare, pharmaceutical, biotech, and specialty pharmacy industries. He joined MannKind from Amgen, where he spent over 3 years as Vice President, Global Commercial Lead, and Vice President, Global Lifecycle Management. Prior to Amgen, he was with Bristol-Myers Squibb, Sandoz, Novartis, Merck, and CVS. Mike received his Bachelor of Science in Pharmacy degree from Philadelphia College of Pharmacy, his Director of Pharmacy from Massachusetts College of Pharmacy, and his MBA from the Wharton School of Business at the University of Pennsylvania. Michael Castagna, welcome into the corner office.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
It's great to have you here today. And gosh, we're going into month 4 in COVIDian times, as it's been called. And maybe we just kind of start off a little bit. You guys are kind of square in the space. We spoke a couple of weeks ago. How are you personally holding up, and how is your organization during these pandemic times?
I think it was quite scary for a lot of us back in February, March, as this was coming towards the U.S. and you saw the rampant spread in New York, and some were here right outside of Los Angeles, so right, yeah. We're pretty close to it. And so getting the company prepared, getting our employees prepared, moving to an entire virtual mindset overnight, I think accelerated change pretty quickly. And I think it not only that, we had an opportunity to help bring part of the solutions to COVID as treatments.
Yeah, well, I look forward to hearing more about that as we get into the podcast. So, but your family's doing well. Are you still sheltering in place? I'm not sure. I'm in Connecticut, but as you know, I've got home in California as well. But I've been kind of out of the loop of what's been going on the West Coast.
Yeah, no, I haven't gotten stuck in a college dormitory anywhere yet. So, my kids are home virtually, driving their mom crazy, and but no, we're doing well.
And you're going into the office, or are you still working remotely?
I just came back to the office last week, so we've been out for 2 months. So it was nice to get back. People are slowly coming back in part-time for the month of June. And then as they get back out there in July, August, we'll continue to reevaluate that.
Yeah, and for those of you who are listening, we're recording this during the first week of June, so we're emerging, I think, hopefully post-COVIDian time sometime soon. Well, Michael, let's turn the clock back a little bit earlier. I'd love to hear a little bit about your early years, where you grew up, and what your early family life was like.
Sure. My background, I grew up with a single mom. I was born, living honestly in a mobile home. So most people don't know that. And my mom raised me on her own, and not only how she did it, but she slowly got enough money to own her first business, and then rehabbed the house, and then sold the house, and then bought another business. And kind of we survived, paycheck to paycheck most of my life at the end of the day.
Only child, Michael?
Only child, yeah. I was a handful. So I didn't sleep as a kid, and I still don't sleep as an adult. So that's been one of my successful traits is I'm not as smart as everybody, but I can outwork anybody.
And what part of the country did you grow up in?
I grew up in South Jersey, right outside Camden/Philadelphia, if people know that area of the world.
Yeah, sure. No, well, my daughter's a rower, so we get down there for a number of different rowing activities. Well, that's terrific. And, growing up, were there people that inspired you? It sounds like your mom obviously had a pretty strong influence on you. It sounds like she was a great role model. Anyone else? Was there a special uncle or coach in school or teacher that, influenced you or inspired you during those younger years?
Yeah, two teachers were very impactful in my career. One, I had no mentors. I was the first in my family to graduate high school, let alone get into college.
Wow.
And so there was no one to give me guidance. My mom didn't even know what college really was. She didn't even finish high school and had me at 18 years old. So that gives you a little bit of perspective of her survival. And so when I got to high school, my anatomy teacher actually suggested a pharmacist. And so I said, I love math and science, and I was not a big fan of history and English. And so that's how I wound up focusing my future on pharmacy. And then I applied to the country's oldest school there in Philadelphia. And then my other teacher was my economics teacher, Mr. Scott. And I'll never forget Mr. Scott because he taught me, how the value of savings and compound interest over time. And so I was winning the stock market contests in high school. I've been investing since I was probably 14 years old. And really was a big fan of the stock market and the value it could create if you did it properly.
Yeah. Were you a good student?
No, I was a horrible student.
You know how many times I hear that? It sounds like you excelled at the things you liked, though. Right?
Yeah, I didn't apply myself, in fairness. I didn't have anyone pushing me to do homework. I was more interested in making money and creating stuff. I had my own lawn business. I had my own paper route for the town. I had servicing. I would service old people's homes and do errands for them. So I was always entrepreneurial by nature, but never really applied myself to school. And in college, I started to learn. I probably had a learning disability that I just never really understood what that was and how hard studying was for me. And
have you been diagnosed with that later in life? Did you have ADHD or dyslexia?
Yeah, no, I went and I think I've gotten smarter as I gotten older. So maybe by the time I went to get diagnosed, they said, no, you're doing good. So.
Well, the sleep thing was kind of a hint on that part, right? What about sports? Were you involved in music, theater, debate, any other types of things at school?
Those require brain power. You had to be smart. So I went after football because I just tell me to hit the guy left or right, and I would make the hole for the guy to run by me. And that's about the extent of my sports. I played football for 5 years from middle school to high school.
And you're a big Eagles fan, as we know.
Yeah, and that kept me out of trouble. Honestly, just having a coach and being disciplined in practice, I think it was very helpful at that point in my life.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
When I realized I got to high school, I wasn't big enough, so I moved on to work.
Now, you mentioned entrepreneurial things. What was the first entrepreneurial thing you did? Was it the ubiquitous paper route, or were you doing other things even at an earlier age?
Yeah, I think the paper route was probably the earliest paying job where you had to hustle for your tips and, remember little tickets back then, papers were delivered in the afternoon.
That's right. And you had to go door to door to collect it, right?
And I had an apartment complex with a lot of older people who were very, very nice, and they thought a quarter was a lot of money. And I'm like, are you kidding me? I need 50 cents. But no, I enjoyed the hustle, and and I went on to do many other things that, my kids are always like, how many jobs did you have? I'm like, I've worked at Burger King. I've had paper routes. I've sold pagers. I've sold knives. You name it, I've probably tried it. So
that's great. That's great. And where did all that money go to? Did you have some vices that you enjoyed during those years? Did you save away for college?
No, I was on my own for college. So, I graduated with as little debt as possible. I enjoyed cars. So, I would always spruce up my cars a little bit. But honestly, I invested and I saved. That was my learning in life was, to be financially independent, not struggle like my mother did. And, when you're evicted from your house many times and you got to move a box to, 4 times in a year, you don't like that feeling. And so for me, I never wanted to be in that position. I never wanted my kids to be in that position. And so always making sure we're financially sound was one of my first priorities in life.
Yeah. Fighting for that security. Did you move around schools a lot? Was that part of so mom would move to other towns or within different school districts, I suppose?
I probably went to 5 where I couldn't learn as much. I went to 10 schools by the time I was in 6th grade.
Oh, my goodness. By 6th grade. Oh, my gosh.
And then I got a little bit of stability. We moved towns, but I could commute to the old school. And high school was finally nice. I got to stay in one high school, one house for 4 years. Yeah.
Did mom eventually remarry?
Mom never got married. Still single today, living in New Jersey. Yeah. And, it's because I'm a divorced parent now. And I remember my mom would meet a man and I would like him. And then she would break up with him. I'm like, he was actually a nice guy. What are you doing? And so I was very conscious about who my kids would meet and that part of my life as I went through that next journey. And I ultimately got remarried and I've been very lucky. And so my kids say, hey, I got 2 moms. I get 2 holidays. I get 2 everything.
That's right. That's right. I got a couple of those as well. So thinking back to those school sessions and the work that you did, of course, during school, what was kind of the one that you thought really was the funnest, or maybe the one you made the most money at and you really enjoyed and did over a longer period of time? Tell us a little bit about that.
Selling clothes in high school, I was making $12 an hour back in '93.
Wow, that's pretty cool. At retail, I presume.
At retail, I was very successful selling, and that's when I discovered it was in my family genes probably, but I love selling clothes because then I got everything at 50% off and I could dress nice. So
that's great. Yeah.
That was one of my more favorite jobs. And then my second favorite job outside of my professional jobs has been valeting cars. I love cars, and being able to be paid to actually drive a Porsche and someone's Land Rover, I thought was the coolest thing.
Did you work for like a valet company where you'd go to private parties, or was it at a restaurant or a hotel?
I did one of the most popular nightclubs in Philadelphia, right on the riverfront there back in the 90s. Fantastic. And I'll never forget, a guy pulled up in a Ferrari and gave me the keys. I'm like, you're crazy.
How do you know you ever see me again?
And I said, I looked at his thing. I was, what are you doing? He goes, water ice. And I'm like, I'm going to own a water ice shop. So.
When did you make the decision about going to college? I mean, obviously you didn't have role models there. I'm sure you had some folks that encouraged you. Was that something that you decided on early on?
Yeah, look, I thought college is what you did to be successful.
Right.
And so therefore I wanted to be successful, and therefore I thought college was the solution. The question is, my goal was to make $100,000 a year. And what could I do that? And the degree that enabled me to do that was a pharmacy degree. And my goal after that was to go back and either get a business degree or become a physician. And so when I looked at being able to work part-time as a pharmacist, for example, saying, I can make $50,000 part-time. Well, that's more than my mother ever made. I could easily work 20 hours a week and go to school full-time and go be a doctor. And then when I got to that point in pharmacy school, I started working in the industry my second year of college in 1997 in pharmaceuticals. So I've never left. It's been 23 phenomenal years of track record here. And therefore I wound up not going to medical school because I pretty much knew I wanted to stay in the industry, and I felt I could help society by doing what I do in drug development and running a company.
And you actually worked as a pharmacist, right, at CVS while you were getting your degree, correct?
Yeah. So as soon as I got into pharmacy school, I immediately got a job at CVS. And then 6 months later, I got a job at a hospital. So I was working 2 jobs. And then I had a third job doing per diem work at a nursing home and specialty pharmacy. So I was working 3 jobs through school, working 40, 50 hours a week.
Wow.
And taking full credits of 20 credits a semester. And so when I see these kids today, they're worried about balance and yoga. And I'm like, I'm sorry, I worked nonstop. I studied nonstop. And
well, you don't sleep. You get an extra 8 hours a day, Michael, and all of us, the rest of us.
That is true. It was a very important secret ingredient I had.
Oh, great. And you were with CVS for a good long time. What was it, about 14 years?
Yeah, I started there in 95 and I left around 2010. So back when I worked for them, they were 1,200 stores and now they're 9,000. So, it was a good run. And what's funny to me is the same problems I saw when I worked for them even a decade ago are the same problems they have today as a company. They've been able to grow, but they still have interesting cultural things, right? But they've continued to evolve.
And you went back to the Wharton School. We have that in common. Got your MBA. Was that kind of your motivation as well to get that finishing degree to kind of refine your business goal, business skills, or what was the logic around getting the MBA? So
when I went to pharmacy school, we had a joint alliance with Drexel, and so I had already finished my first year of my MBA by the time I finished pharmacy school by taking all the electives during that time, and then if you know where Wharton is, you come up off Spruce Street there off 76. And every day I would come off the exit and I would drive by the Wharton School and go to make a left and go to pharmacy school, which was 6 blocks down on 42nd Street.
Right.
And so when I thought about going to school, actually, I didn't think I could get into Wharton. So I was at the point now where I applied, and I was either going to go back part-time at Drexel or full-time in the executive MBA. And I got in the second time. I didn't get in the first time because I was 24 trying to get to an executive MBA program. And they said, you have the
What kind of experience do you have?
They said, our average age is 36, maybe work another year or two and get promoted. So I took their feedback. I boosted my GMAT and reapplied, and I got in the second time. And
Good for you.
Good for you. And did you do that full time, or was that an executive program?
I did the executive MBA, which then I worked full-time and went to school full-time again. And it was hard. I mean, it was really hard. And forever thankful. I wound up meeting my wife. I recently got married 3 years ago. And she's a Wharton alum as well. We met at a Wharton alumni event.
So looking back at some of those earlier years, and let's say kind of up to the time before you left CVS, so, what were some of the early leadership lessons? I mean, did you manage people during that period? You remember the first time you started to manage people?
Yeah, my biggest lesson was I was very fortunate. I met somebody who worked in a hospital when I was working in the hospital, and he said, "What are you going to do when you're done?" And I said, "I'm not really sure. I'm just starting out." And he took me down the industry, and I was able to meet 10 pharmacists and maybe a couple other executives, but 10 people who all got to their jobs through different ways, meaning somebody was a school teacher, somebody was a pharmacist doing training, somebody was a pharmacist doing marketing, business development. And so I realized within pharmacy, you could do 7 different things, just that alone, but they all took different career paths. And I realized at a young age that, as much as people tell you to follow the sequential career succession, the reality is people just want people that are going to be hardworking, deliver good quality products, and think on their feet and be able to drive innovation and transformation in business. And that's really I was always willing to push companies forward and push the brands hard, not just to put something on the deck to get me promoted and make me look good, but really to drive change. And I think that's been a secret to my career. I've never been one to play the politics. I'm not good at it. And I just worked really hard to make a difference. And I felt that has paid off in my career. And I manage my own career. And I always tell this to people is, companies have pathways and that's your choice to stick to them. But there's plenty of employers out there and everyone needs good employees. So
did you have any favorite bosses or mentors along the way, particularly during those early years?
Yeah, I had a couple. And one of my biggest mentors turned out to have a major flaw. And that was a very disappointing thing because, someone you looked up to for many years turned out to really have some bad behaviors personally. And that dropped them, from high on my list to bottom of my list. And then I had another mentor that was my boss twice for Bristol-Myers Squibb. And Kevin taught me a lot about leadership and pharmaceuticals and business planning and just a great person who I could always bounce ideas off. And then another guy who was my boss back in the early 2000s, Pat, was one of the best people leaders I ever had. And he taught me a lot about leadership of people and how to manage people. And I felt that those lessons early in my career paid dividends down the road. We always have things we can improve upon as leaders, but being able to motivate and recruit the best talent to me is what's important. And then ultimately empowering them to go do what they do best,
So true.
Were there behaviors that you saw that you said, oh boy, that's a good lesson. That's something I never want to do. And if so, what were those?
I think there's 2 things that I see in people's personalities sometimes that scared me as I was growing my career and scare me when I see them working for us. Number one is people believe knowledge is power. And if you believe in keeping information is going to make you more valuable, that's good for the short term, but not sharing and collaborating is actually that's a bad skill. And there's several people I often see that think having more knowledge and more information makes them more powerful and people have to come to them. And that's a really bad trait. And so I've always felt spreading knowledge and sharing knowledge is important and collaborating is important. That's number one. And number 2 is honestly just not being a control freak. You can't know everything no matter who you are. We're all human. And many people feel like you need to know every single little thing about everything. And I'm curious by nature, so I want to know everything. And I'm sure that drives some of my people crazy. They're like, how do you keep so much knowledge in your head? But it's because I love what I do. And so other people, this is a job and this is work, and I respect that tremendously. They're fathers and they're taking care of their parents, or they got other priorities in life besides work. But I don't feel like I've worked one day in 23 years. And when you can come to work every day loving what you do and having a passion for what you do, it's priceless. And I think that's to me, I have found my zen, and I've always enjoyed healthcare. And so therefore, back to those traits is knowing your business, knowing how to put the pieces together. Those are valuable, but trying to control and beat up everybody because they don't know something, that's not good leadership.
Yeah, what you said about love and passion is so clear. I think Mark Twain is giving credit for the, find a job you love and never work a day in your life. And I think I felt that as well. That's so important. But I want to track to MannKind, where you're currently CEO today. I know you've been there about 4.5 years. But before we do so, you have an amazing background. You worked for CVS for almost 14, 15 years. Great company, learned the trade. And then you worked for Merck, Sandoz, Bristol-Myers Squibb, and Amgen. I mean, probably 4 of the leading companies in the area of healthcare and obviously health products. Tell me a little bit about kind of the common thread through that career path with just those 4 jobs that, kind of inspired you and moved you along. Was it planned? Was it haphazard? Was there, a little bit of strategy there? And, give us a little bit of insight because you've just worked for such terrific companies over your career.
Yeah. So I started my career at DuPont Pharma, and then Bristol-Myers Squibb bought DuPont Pharma in 2001. And so I was loyal to Bristol-Myers because they paid for my MBA and they took very good care of me and trained me to be a marketer.
Right.
And then I finished business school, and I got to this point in 2005 where my boss, Kevin, who was my mentor, had the golden handcuffs. And I really didn't know what golden handcuffs were back in 2005.
Mm.
And he was the smart guy. And I'm like, dude, why don't you get out of here? You're so freaking smart. And he wouldn't leave. And he had all the stock. And I'm sitting there going, I don't want to be Kevin in 10 years.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I actually quit. And
Wow.
I went to a startup because I felt if I stayed 10 more years, I would have those golden handcuffs and I wouldn't make the right choices for my career.
Mm.
I'd make them for money.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to make career choices for money. And I never have.
Mm.
And that's my one lesson for people is don't ever follow
Wow.
money. Follow passion and skills, and that'll make you
Yeah.
money. And so I left in 2005, and I went to a small company. I was number 33 employee at a company called Pharmasset. And many people heard of Pharmasset ultimately because they got acquired by Gilead for, I think, $11 billion. But when I went there, they were worth $100 million and privately held, trying to go public. And at that time, I had a job offer for J&J making a lot more money. But I took the startup and I got that experience for a year.
Mm.
And the lesson then was it failed, right? And it failed in that the company survived and succeeded, but the 4 compounds I went to work on all failed in the first 12 months.
Wow.
And we were working on a small preclinical asset called Sovaldi, which became the cure for Hep C today. But back then, it was a little molecule that was a micron. So I then, as those things were falling short, I told the CEO, I wanted to be head of commercial. He wanted to hire a gray-haired executive to go public. And I said, well, I came to be the head of commercial, so I know I'm only 30 years old, but I'm going to go somewhere else.
Right.
So I wound up moving to Boston. And then from there, it was about skill sets. So every job I took after that one was about learning something and bringing something. And ultimately, they were turnaround jobs. And I didn't know that as I was going through the journey. But I love challenges. And so I wind up doing turnarounds on businesses that were suffering or drugs that suffered launches or disruptive. You had the disruptive business model. So
Right.
that's, when you look at Serono, which became Merck Serono up in Boston, great opportunity, huge leader in biologics, loved it. Then I went to Novartis Sandoz to work and build out their biosimilar business, which are trying to change the cost of healthcare and biologics and build a whole new area. That was fun. And then from there, I went back to Bristol-Myers Squibb after a 5-year hiatus to turn around one of their franchises there called Orencia. And that was fun. And then from Bristol-Myers, the executive had gone out to Amgen and wanted me to come out to California to help Amgen get ready for ultimately biosimilars, which was coming to attack them. And I didn't want to live in California, but it was worth 3 years of my life. My kids were young and said, okay, I got to move international, whether I stay at Bristol-Myers or Amgen. So Amgen is a pretty cool company.
Right.
So
Right.
I kind of took these jobs to learn new skills, and along the way, got a title promotion, you get a little bit more money, but
Yep.
you kept building out skills. And ultimately, when I went back to Bristol-Myers Squibb the second time, I've realized by leaving, I was more valuable to the company because I had all these experiences that I couldn't have gotten had I stayed. And so that's the secret to success, is taking a little bit of a risk on yourself and getting experience, because it's hard to get all that experience in one company these days. And it's great if you can
Right.
stay, but
Yeah.
they often won't move you as quickly as you want to move or give you that stretch assignment that you're looking for, but somebody else will. And
Yeah.
as long as you're willing to bet on yourself, I think you'll build a new skill set and make yourself more valuable to the market.
Great strategy. Did you get that international assignment with Amgen?
I think I mentioned earlier in this call, I got my divorce, and so that I wasn't going to leave to my kids,
Of course, yeah.
and so that became a career discussion, which is, hey, I'm still want to grow my career at Amgen, but if you want me to go run, a country or a region, we got to have a different conversation.
That's
And
not going to
so,
work. Yeah. Right.
So I think Amgen would have been flexible enough to get me where I wanted to be. They treated me very well, and I respected them a lot. But I got lucky in that little MannKind here was an hour away, and it came to a startup again. And I remember in 2016, this little notice came across. I was a shareholder in MannKind. That's how I found out about the company years ago. And I said, "Oh, Sanofi's handing it back." And I literally know where Valencia, California was, so I Googled it. And I'm like, it's an hour from me. I could do that commute. So I emailed the CEO at the time and said, "Love to join you. I do turnarounds, and this could be. I think it's a great drug, and you're going to need a team quickly." And 3 weeks later, I had an offer.
Wow, that's fabulous. Now, for those that are listening, they may not know about MannKind. So just tell us a little bit about the company, your scope, product operations, services. And you did not start as CEO, right? So you came into the C-suite. Was that your first job there?
Yeah, so I came in as chief commercial officer, building out the commercial infrastructure to take this product back and relaunch it. And, the drug is incredible. It's an inhaled insulin. So for those people who know anyone with diabetes, a lot of people delay insulin by 4 to 7 years. They don't want to get into injections and checking their blood sugar. Right. And it's real unfortunate because that's when the damage is really happening, when you got these high and low sugars. So our drug basically treats every time you eat, your sugars go up and you want to bring them down quickly. That's what we do. And you want to do that safely. And we don't have as much hypoglycemia, which is the number one side effect of insulin. So people are so afraid to dose their insulin properly because of life and death of hypoglycemia. And that's something that is really important. Yeah. And so a lot of people thought, it's just inhaled. I'm comfortable doing what I'm doing for the last 100 years. And the reality is it's not the reason to use our particular product. It's because of all the other benefits of using it with technology and safety.
Is the efficacy as high as an insular through?
We've been doing some new studies on dosing and making sure we dose it properly. And that's probably the biggest flaw in the history of the development was everyone tried to treat it like injectable insulin, and they wind up underdosing the patients. And they got as good as the standard of care. But if you dose it properly, you can beat the standard of care. And that's been some of the work we've been doing is showing you now, if you just switch your insulin alone, you're getting improvements that is equivalent to a new drug. And so you're not just getting the insulin, you're actually getting the avoidance of adding a third or fourth drug to your regimen. So that's new data coming out. In fact, we got data coming out next week at ADA. That'll be exciting. For the first time in 15 years or so, we'll show quality of life data. Improvement there and some good A1C reduction. So the company's a turnaround, and it was a turnaround not just because of the drug failure, but we had a lot of debt. And so, a year into my job, I became CEO by accident and did not expect it. I expected to train under the existing CEO for 4 to 5 years because I never ran a public company and I didn't know Wall Street. And overnight, literally 3 years ago, last week, I became CEO of MannKind, and I jokingly said you couldn't find somebody else. What happened? Because, I think our stock was down around less than $1, and the market cap was around $80 million from $500 million. It was a mess. And honestly, day by day, we dug the company out. I hired a new management team and rebuilt our reputation with Wall Street and investors. And it's been a long road for the investors. The stock is down 90% from its peak. And but we're now stable, and little by little we're growing. And I think this year should be our transition, meaning we don't have any major debts due. We don't need any major capital raises. The drug is growing. COVID was a minor setback. We weren't sure at the time it would be a major setback, but it was a minor setback now looking back. And so, when I look at all the survival this company's had over years, that's what's in the DNA of this company, which I love, is the ability to overcome obstacles to succeed is in our culture and our people. And we want to retain that. And our founder was a billionaire. It's a little bit of history of the company. He had built the insulin pump and pacemaker and cochlear implant, just a true visionary, true innovator.
Where does the name come from? Was his name Mann, or
his name was Alfred E. Mann? So that's someone jokingly, when they were going public and building the company, said, "What should you call it?" And somebody said MannKind, and he's like, "I like that name," and that's how the name stuck.
That's how it stuck. I love it. That's awesome. And how many employees today, and what's the approximate sales of the company? Well, you're publicly traded, so you can talk about it, I guess.
Yeah, no, we got about 250 employees, and about a third are in manufacturing, and about almost half are in the field or dealing with customers. And then you got the management team. So
And you're all in Valencia. That's your headquarters.
No, we moved. Now we're in Thousand Oaks, Westlake Village. We moved right down the street from Amgen, so that I could either recruit from Amgen, or as we recruited people, their spouses could work for Amgen. So
there you go. And cut your commuting time down pretty significantly too.
Yeah, I was driving 3 hours a day, so that's definitely down.
Yeah, that 126 can get a little boring after a while. Well, that's awesome. And so today, moving forward, are you focusing, again, if you can talk about it, great, but are you purely just the inhaled insulin product? Are there other products and ways in which you intend to develop the business longer term?
Yeah, no, great question. We just rebranded the company in January, so we had the same look and feel for 20 years, and we thought it was time for a fresh up, and our team did a great job there. And so now you can see we got bright magenta, we have new values, new mission, and focus. And so one of the things we took a step back and said, what does our technology do? And we felt that we relieve symptoms of your disease quickly so that you can go back and have the freedom to live your life. And so that's basically our mission, is to work with products in endocrinology and orphan lung diseases that can treat symptoms. So you can take, diabetes, you want fast sugars gone. Migraine, we have a platform in migraine we're working on right now. It looks really good and exciting. Epinephrine is another one. And then pulmonary hypertension, which is an orphan lung disease. We're working with a partner called United Therapeutics, which is going very well. And we just completed our 3rd out of 4th milestone. So that's very exciting. And honestly, I just finished up 8 investor calls last Friday, and people are very excited about the future of the company and the role that United Therapeutics is going to play in our development. Plus, so when you take our growth going forward, you got Afrezza growing U.S., you got Afrezza growing outside the U.S., you have this United Therapeutics partnership, you got the pipeline moving. So we did a lot in 3 years. It doesn't feel like that because our stock price has been stagnant, but we're still here, we've survived, and we've recapitalized, and now everything's moving in the right direction.
Let's talk a little bit about your management style. And, I've heard recently, particularly with new CEOs, sometimes they are uncomfortable having their answers questioned rather than their questions answered. Have you been in that situation? If so, how do you handle that?
It's funny because I think one of the things I don't do well is I try to be just like our average employee. And I'm very open door, very open book, very transparent, for better or for worse. And and I think out loud sometimes, and that actually sometimes creates more work in the system than I like. And so I've tried to realize that even though I'm a person that works as a colleague to my employees, sometimes because of my title as CEO, it unfortunately carries more weight than I want it to.
That's right.
And so that's been one of the learning challenges, right? Is as a CEO, people want good leadership, they want clear direction. And that's been important, that I've personally had to make some changes in my own style.
2 ears and 1 mouth comes to mind.
Right. And I've always gotten this feedback is, Mike, before people walk in the room, you already know the answer. And I just never believed that because I was a dumb kid and I struggled in school. And therefore, I always thought people were smarter than me and knew more than me. And for me to be smarter than the average person in the room, I never really accepted, to be honest with you, until probably the last 5, 6, 7 years of my life. And so I have to do a better job of listening. I'll be the first one to tell you that. And I don't mind people challenging me. I actually appreciate when someone challenges me, and I tell them, you got to hit me twice as hard because I'm so thick-headed. I'm Italian. So don't be bashful. Just tell me direct. Because if you're being indirect, I'm not smart enough to catch the team. And so I think that as people learn how to work with me, they know I mean well. They know I care about our employees tremendously and their growth. And they know that I have a passion for what we do. So I just like winning and making differences for people. And sometimes that comes across as directive, and that's not always meant that way. But we will win at the end of the day. I will not let any obstacle hold us back.
What other adjustments have you made in your management style, Mike, since you've entered the corner office?
Even a little bit before the corner office, but it's really because I never sleep. I would work till 2, 3 in the morning every night. And I would send emails, and what I didn't realize until I got a 360 is someone said, I understand you don't sleep, but I do. And so when I wake up first thing in the morning and I got 20 emails, that my days already started off stressful. So I have learned how to actually not send emails as much in the evening. I still do sometimes, so I'll never get rid of it. I'm the CEO, but I have learned how to do a better job, and I've tried to make email less of a way of managing and communicating, and going back to really honestly picking up the phone and calling people and having open office meetings. I feel like we think because we send something on email, it's done and we check the box. And that's really a poor way of executing and communication. And it's still a big problem in any company.
Well, you've got that send later button you can use. I've only discovered that in the last couple of years, but I'm like you, I'm up to 1 or 2 o'clock and I got the same sort of feedback. I'll set it up to where it sends at 9:30 or 10 o'clock in the morning. Right.
I've not learned that feature yet, so that'll be my other gap. I got some technology improvements, but yeah.
I love it. What about micromanagement? Has that been a style of yours? And if so, how do you deal with that in situations?
I don't think so. I probably say ask my employees, but that's not something I expect people to know their job. So that's probably not as much micromanagement as know all the stuff connected to what you do and collaborate with everyone else. And if you're doing that well, we'll get along. But I don't have time to micromanage people. I really honestly want to hire good people who are committed to doing their job and doing it the best of anyone in the industry. And I think if you got a committed, passionate team, you win. And I don't have to micromanage. But if I got to start micromanaging you, we probably got the wrong employee.
Well, the CEO is also responsible for the company culture. And even though you've inherited a company that's, 20 plus years old, it sounds like you've gone through that process recently with a new branding and new values. What would you say is unusual or unique about your culture at MannKind?
It's really that can-do attitude. We're a pharmaceutical company by nature of definition of our drug.
Right.
But the culture and the DNA of the company is much more of a device company where continuous innovation and overcoming barriers to solving engineering challenges, right? Just give you an example, the company had to figure out how to scale up this inhaled powder, and it's never been done in 100 years. We spent $2 billion and 20 years building it. And, they went to the food processing industry to learn how to make Dippin' Dots and borrow that technology to make inhaled insulin. So, we're working on this pipeline compound. There's all kinds of hairy things that happen in the manufacturing process. And this team has just worked continuously to innovate how like we found some equipment on eBay, and I'm like, who would have thought? They just have this attitude that I will figure it out. And I love it about the company. And, I keep telling our employees, we are a consumer-driven company, and we got to act like our patients are the center of our universe, and we got to make it easy for them and make them proud to want to be part of us and our culture. Every drug company wants to run from their patients and their customers, in my opinion, and because they don't want information from HIPAA, they don't want compliance issues. And I'm like, we're the only industry that says we don't want to know our customer. Every other industry, you do everything you can to know your customer.
Of course.
And so I'm very passionate about putting the patient at the center of everything we do and making sure their experience is as easy as possible and as successful as possible. And I think that's what you'll continue to see from us is how do we transform the world around the patient, because their life is so difficult in what they do every day, living with this disease and every disease any patient has. So, I think from a pure overcoming obstacles to a consumer-driven mindset, that's who we are. And that does differentiate us culturally and our people that work here.
Yeah, I really like that, putting the patient at the center. That just makes so much sense. What do you look for when you're making bets on the people you invest in and hire, Mike?
Some of the intangibles, it's funny. I've just come to appreciate, and I don't weigh education in terms of what college you went to, because I probably wasn't smart enough to know half the colleges out there. And I always looked at work ethic and kind of passion and drive in people. And what I've come to appreciate, when you look at immigrants who've come to this country in the last 10 or 20 years, or just in general, they came here with a lot of times nothing to build a better life, and their risk taken is much higher, and their passion for trying to be successful is much higher. I've recently had a new appreciation with some books I'm reading around people that invest to go back to college as part of their career or part of their own development. That's a big sacrifice. And I didn't think about it when I did it a couple times. I probably spent more of my life in school than out of school, but it's because I just love learning. But when I think about other people who don't love learning, it's difficult to do. And so now I look at that, people are investing in themselves, and if they go back to college and get an MBA or a master's in something, it's another sacrifice, and that they're probably committed to success, and that's the kind of people you want to attract. And then the rest is just people. I mean, you can be an individual contributor, but everyone has an opportunity to be a leader. And I think sometimes people that are individual contributors don't realize the influence they can have in being a leader, even as an individual contributor. So someone that has that potential, I'd rather people have taken risk on me in my career. I became CEO at 40. Without people betting on me, I couldn't have gotten to where I am. And I want to continue to pay that forward on our talent coming up the company. And the same thing with my executive team. I mean, they're incredibly talented and have been well experienced, and everyone here works, countless hours and underpaid. But they continue to do their job exceptionally well, and I couldn't have assembled a better team. That's success breeds success. When you interview, when people interview here, the first thing they walk away with shock and awe. They're like, how does this great group of talent work in a small company? And that's what I love. That feedback consistently comes across when you meet the people here. you want to be part of a winning team. And that's, our struggle internally is the stock hasn't taken off in the scripts and what